Okay, the recording has begun. Hi, everybody. I am in the SCA known as Lord Drake Oranwood. I am an East Kingdom bard. I am currently the Queen's Bardic Champion of the East Kingdom. This is the new Bards Roadmap, a class I've taught a few times. This came out of a conversation I had with someone who at the time was a new bard a few years back, where she expressed to me how she really wished of all the different classes that she saw about Bardic and about performance, that while there's a lot of stuff that can teach you a technique, that can focus on how to write, how to find source material, how to perform, she really wished there would have been a class where somebody was explaining, for lack of a better term, maybe the unwritten rules, the structure, the institutional structure of the SCA and how it works with Bardic. Sort of a how-to. And I came to realize that what she was talking about was something I had wanted when I started about 8 years ago, which was a roadmap, a sense of where am I relative to where I might want to go, where I could end up. I'm going to take a moment and shift the lighting so that it is going to hopefully be less variable. There we go. Because I get light coming in from over here. So that led to this. I don't have I don't have a monopoly on experience in Bardic. I'm sure all of you have various levels of experience, and so I'm open to, on the chat or periodically in the room, having conversations or having some Q&A as we go. Let's see how it goes. It's worked okay so far in the other classes I've been teaching. So the objectives that I have in mind for you, that I hope you'll be able to leave this class with, I'd like to offer from my perspective, with the caveat that it's my perspective. And I've been to Penzic. I've been out of Kingdom a little. I know the East very well. I do not know other kingdoms as well. I do have some sense from Penzic conversations of some of what they have in common and ways in which they differ. But I'd like to offer up a working knowledge of both the formal and the informal framework within which SCA bards operate. I'm hopefully going to try and open things up so that you, in your place as a growing, expanding bard, can start to identify for yourself maybe 3 objectives that you'd like to pursue in the coming year. Understanding, of course, that right now in the middle of lockdown for COVID-19 in 2020, a lot of things don't look like they looked on the brochure. And as a Kingdom Bard right now, I promise that's true. And we can have some conversation, if you'd like, about ways in which some of those plans maybe can be adjusted or adapted to the current moment. And I also invite you to take away from this and think about this with an eye toward at least one long-term goal that you're interested in pursuing as a bard. Those are some of the things that helped me move forward. And as I said, as we go through, we'll get into that. So I'll start with the big drinking question. What is a bard? It comes up a lot. I don't know how many of you are in the SCA Bardic Arts group in Facebook, which I helped launch 8 years ago, and I'm a co-moderator for. It comes up there a lot. It comes up in a lot of different contexts. Those of us who've spent a lot of time with the question sometimes rolled our eyes when it's brought up. It's still a valid question because it's a real catch-all word. Here are some of the things that you can mean by bard. Here's some of the things that bards can do. It does tend to be a catch-all term. Some people don't like the term because their persona is not an early Irish poet, and therefore, historically speaking, their persona would not be able to make heads or tails of the idea of identifying themselves as a bard. I tend to resolve that by saying, look, we all need some common language to talk about what we do when we play in the SCA. Fighters are fighters, and most of them, probably their personas, would not say, I am a fighter. Everybody would have a culturally appropriate term in the language of their choice describing their endeavor. And of course, there's a lot of sub-activities under fighting. Bard is a catch-all term deliberately, so that those of us who do solo vocal performance, among other things, have a space that we can all kind of collect. Bardic circles are a place that is predominated by, though not exclusive to, solo vocal performances, spoken or sung, poetry or prose, readings from a play. Why? Well, it's convenient. It's a term most people know. It's easy to spell, it's easy to say, and anybody who's played an RPG may have a reference. Here are some of the things that, in my experience, I've seen SCA bards do and that I've done as an SCA bard. We sing, we tell stories, we recite poetry. We often adapt period works for performance to modern SCA audiences, which is not a trivial undertaking. We often will write original works, which may be, but aren't necessarily, about the SCA. Sometimes we write about it and try to deepen the game, to write about it in a way that feels like what we're doing is what was being done in period, which is part of the illusion, part of the intent. Sometimes we do that in a more period frame, and sometimes we do that in a frame that speaks a musical language we believe that our listeners, who are essentially modern people in garb, will resonate with emotionally. Sometimes we collaborate with other bards and we do things that are not solo performances because we perform together. And sometimes we do this and we choose not to call ourselves bards. There are various reasons people don't want to call themselves bards. There's the persona thing. There's people who, in their mind, bards must be someone who writes, and they don't write. In their mind, a bard must be someone who performs period work, and they don't do that yet. Heather Dale, or Marion of Heatherdale, as she's known in the SCA, was an early influence of mine, still a good friend. And a catchphrase of hers when she does her big concert at Penzic, when she introduces a guest performer that she wants her big audience to see, who maybe does something that other people might not have thought of as falling under the Bardic umbrella. Usually, she often says something along the lines of, but this person tells stories with their art, and that's bard enough for me. And I love that. I always get a chill when she says that. Let me stop here before we go on. Is there anything anybody has a question about in that introductory kind of umbrella thing before I talk about the roles of the bard in the SCA? Feel free to unmute and ask or post in the chat. And after a few moments, I'll just assume we should go on. All right. So some of the roles of a bard in the SCA, it's a specific thing, it is many specific things. And it evolves over time. Probably the chief role, the one that I think most people are familiar with, is that of an entertainer. Being a circle performer, being a fire walker at a camping event, being a busker, playing with the cup out and maybe earning enough revenue to be able to afford the event or whatever else. Being a stage performer, like Heather, and as I myself do now when I can. Another key role, there are many baronies and kingdoms that have a champion, that have champions of all stripes, often martial, often an ANS champion, and many of them have a bardic champion. Not all. But that can be a very formal or informal role depending on who is in charge at the time and how it's organized and how someone who holds that role organizes the process of finding a successor. Another important role of a bard is as an SCA historian, a creator of word fame, who sees things that they admire, sometimes things that they reprove, and puts out the word and effectively teaches and promotes values in the society. My first Bardic teacher was Maître Lucien de Pontivy of the East, a woman with a male persona who is not hung up about gender identity, but that just happens to be the way she plays. And it works really well for her. But she had me read a wonderful piece by, I think it was Joseph of Locksley, breaking down some of the complexities of the ways that can work and the roles of a bard. That historical bards, Irish bards in particular, though not only they, were purveyors of values. They were the voice of the kingdom. They were the memory in a pre-literate society. Another vital role of a bard in the SCA that may be obvious and may be less obvious to some is that of, especially as you advance, as you find success for yourself, as you find opportunities, and Heather epitomizes this, is to be a patron and an advocate of bards and the bardic arts. These are all, to me, key parts of the role of a bard. No one person is expected to embody all of them at the same time. And my suggestion, my invitation, is that they can all be areas where you're going to grow, where you're going to explore. We'll get to it. I probably will repeat it more than once. I, for one, am a passionate defender, and this is a hill I'm willing to die on. Ultimately, I want this to be fun. I want it to be fun for me when I do it, and I want it to be fun for other people when they do it. Putting yourself out there, getting up, and being the subject of everyone's gaze and scrutiny and sometimes criticism is not for the faint of heart. And it should be rewarding. We pour so much energy and creativity and passion and perfectionism sometimes into this. And so I will passionately defend your right to do what you want as a bard, to occupy the roles that are comfortable for you, and look at the roles that don't feel like they fit you and decide whether or not you now or later or ever want to grow into them. I'm a passionate defender to do what appeals to you, and we're going to get to that in a few minutes. So let's talk about the Bardic arts as a bigger thing, although I'll pause again. Hi. Welcome. And continuing on, we are recording, and I will share out the class notes at the end of the class. Welcome aboard. Let me pause here, actually. If we could go quick round, and if I just want to see either pop in or on the chat as you feel comfortable. What kingdom are you from? I want to just get a sense of what representation we have, because I'm East. I know that a couple of you are friends of mine who are in the East.
North Shield.
North Shield, excellent. See East, hi Craig. Ethelmark, yay. Kaid, awesome. Outlands, awesome. Anybody else, or have we covered pretty much for the moment? You know, I know bards from a lot of different places. Artemisia, very cool. Wonderful. Antir and Meridies. Ooh, we have a really cool cross section. Thank you. That is a fascinating cross section. Just from the limited bit I know of some of those kingdoms, I know that there's a lot of fascinating inter-kingdom anthropology that can be discussed about the differences in those cultures, especially around Bardic. So I'll keep going. Uh, so the Bardic arts in the STA, and again, this will vary in different places, different times. Bardic arts, if you're big on category trees, and category trees are useful, Bardic arts falls under the general umbrella of performing arts. We'll get into this in the politics a little. Some of the challenge some people have around Bardic arts is that it's a kind of performer, but not all performers are bards, but all bards are essentially performers. Big events like Penzik, big war events and the like, and sometimes smaller events may have a space for performing arts. They may have teaching tracks for classes, and Bardic classes, as a rule, usually fall under that umbrella. They fall under the performing arts track. They definitely do at Penzik. They also fall under the arts and sciences pillar of the SCA, as opposed to the martial or services pillars. To the extent that there is a peerage path, and there is, the primary peerage path for most bards is the Laurel Path. You can be a bard without having any aspirations to be a Laurel. I know bards who ultimately have ascended to the Pelican. I know many who ascended both. I definitely know some who ascended the Pelican before they became Laurels and who may have never become Laurels. Bardic and the arts are unquestionably a gift, and gifts are a beautiful way to provide service. Word fame can be a form of service. Blessing people, helping people process challenging emotions, helping people feel that they belong are all vital parts of service. I myself have ultimately, to my great surprise, received a service award last year in my kingdom, the entry-level service award, the Silver Wheel. And it was the result of an artistic endeavor that I got involved in. And when we sold the collaborative CD that came out of that, all of the funding from that went to the Kingdom Travel Fund for the Royals. And so looking back, it maybe shouldn't have surprised me as much as it did. So there's a little of both. And it would not surprise me if a lot of bards you talk to, the peerage path, if that's what interests them, is the Laurelet. The Laurelet, that peerage path, will tend in most kingdoms to focus on research. And it can be a tricky fit in the ANS path because our focus, generally speaking, is to create experiences, moments in time, experiential art, as opposed to artifact-based art, as opposed to something you can see and touch and discuss the construction of. It tends to be for people who don't perform very outside many of their wheelhouse. So it can be a very challenging fit, and we'll talk a little bit about some of the ways that can play out. There are also, based on the kingdom culture, based on how much focus and passion there is for original sung music, songs that tell our own stories, versus, and this is, I think it's fair to say true in the East Kingdom, where I am, a very heavy focus on authentic period research and authentic period material. If I don't pay some serious attention and put some of my performance chops into performing period material in some way, it would be very difficult for me to advance in the peerage track, in the ANS track formally. I made the choice to focus in on learning to play a lute guitar and learning lute pieces and being able to document them and try to bring them to life as my way of showing that respect and embracing Elizabethan culture, because that's where my persona is. It'll be different for everybody. We'll talk about that a little bit more. So as I said, the recognition can vary wildly. There are, and I've heard of and met people who basically became Bardic Laurels, that their prowess, the argument some make is that in telling stories that engross and capture and enthrall an audience and make them drop into a moment, what you are doing is what bards in period did. And bards in period did not necessarily go and research the way people told stories 500 years prior to them and try to recreate that. They often took stories from maybe 500 years ago, retold them in a way that fit the audience of their day, and used the musical language, the poetic forms, and reflected the values that they knew their audience would appreciate. Goodness knows the King Arthur stories have been through over a millennium of that sort of transformation. So, thank you, Alan. I thank you, because that's very much how I see Bardic. I had the good fortune of competing, which we'll get to in a moment, for a queen who is a bard and who sees the role of the bard very much that way. And I knew her well enough to know that if I made it to the end of the day and I presented a piece that could resonate that way for her, I had a reasonable shot. And I was fortunate that I called it correctly, and I knew my judge. And our glorious Margarita is, I don't want to get sidetracked. I adore her. No, and I adored her long before she chose me. But let's speak to competition, because it's the SCA. And certainly in the East Kingdom, which is very prowess focused, there are places that are more or less this way, but competitions are a big thing. We focus very heavily on martial activities, and martial activities are very competitive. That mechanism often recreates itself in other areas. And in ANS and in Bardic, there are competitive venues. So we can have Bardic competitions, which generally, but not exclusively, and usually there will be some explanation of a rubric when it's different, the focus is usually on performance, on how well do you engross the audience, how well do you capture their attention and raise their passions. And there are ANS competitions, which primarily focus on the research, the documentation, and or the authenticity with which you recreate a period performance experience. And there can be, and often is, some overlap. The kingdom level Bardic competition in the East has elements of both. The prowess is really, really important, and there is a requirement of the 3 rounds that you may perform in during the day, that at least one of those be a piece that you can at least document on an index card as having a period source. So those are how it weaves into the specific fabric. So that's where it tends to fold in my experience. And I've been having these conversations with a lot of people. Does anyone have any questions around that before we keep going? Okay. Again, at any point, feel free to ping in the chat. We'll keep going, and we can have a general Q&A when we finish. So let's talk now about, as I said in the title, being a new bard, getting started. This is a question that comes up a lot when I talk to people who are trying, who are dipping their toes into it. And I don't know what levels of experience y'all have. Actually, let's ask that. Quick once round, roughly in years, how long have you been at this in the SCA context as a performer? I said for me, it's basically 8 years that I've been doing it as a thing unto itself.
About 12 years. I was Kingdom Bard about 4 years ago, and that really upped my performance level.
Yeah. Yeah, it'll do it, won't it? Three-ish. Excellent.
5 for me, and that's 3 years after I started playing, because this idea it had to be period kept me away from the circle.
I believe that, and I will continue to talk about that as we go. Thank you for raising that. I saw 3. Just learning, have sung a few times over 35 years, not frequently attempting to perform. About 8 to 10, but just as a participant in circles. Never been to a Bardic event before. Gotcha. Yeah, we have 2 now, thanks to Doug here, 3 performance oriented events in the East Kingdom annually. We have the Kings and Queens Bardic competition because we have a big enough community that we have a competition that can go up to 20 competitors deep for those two roles once a year. We have our Winter Nights all-day competition that now circulates around the kingdom annually. And Doug helped to spearhead the East Kingdom College of Performers, introducing a day of performance challenges, which is somewhat loosely inspired by the Bardic Madness events that a lot of the Mid-Realm and its children, and its offshoot kingdoms hold. But those are all variations. And Winter Nights also was sort of a variation on Bardic Madness. Did I say Midnight Madness? I probably did. So there are lots of different ways it can happen. And there are sometimes formal performance opportunities at regular events. And there are more or less formal. Told stories at one campfire years ago, read poetry another. Yeah. And before I started 8 years ago, I had written some Bardic stuff. I had been to a few circles. I wasn't heavily enough involved for me because we just had a child, and we needed a few years for him to be old enough for us to really be comfortable bringing him to events. And when I came serious, and I want to meet them and I want to learn the secret handshake. And that was how I met Heather. And when I told Heather that the theme for the Bardic Collegium at Penzic, now called, I think, the Bardic Symposium once again, Northshield is Bardic Madness, and I'm going to pop the chat open so I get the rest of that. Bardic Madness and 2 fight bard events, Bardic Blades and Rhythm and Brews. I love it. Yeah, so there's all sorts of opportunities. For those of you who are not yet in the SCA Bardic Arts group, I will mention it only as a way of saying it is a place where these kinds of conversations can be had. There's all sorts of questions and answers, and Hive Mind helped me. That was why I started it. Partly because I wanted those answers, and partly because I realized that one way to get myself insinuated into the community was to put up a tent, so to speak, and create a space where people could connect and do that. And we're coming up on 3,000 members. I think we're less than 100 away from that. So probably before the end of the summer, we're going to hit that milestone. It is a lively conversation, passionate at times, and Annalita and I do our best to moderate it with a light hand, but with great clarity about being courteous and considerate of each other. We're allowed to disagree. We're allowed to volubly disagree. We're not allowed to attack each other because it's not cool. So here are some questions, and here are my personal opinions, which are worth the paper they're printed on, about getting started. What should you perform? If I had a dime for every time I heard somebody say that they stayed away from circles because they did not have period material, and until they had period material, they did not feel that that was appropriate. We'll talk about that a little bit more. I want to just say it leading up. If you're under the impression, you're quite welcome, Magdalena, for starting an SCA-wide group. It's been an amazing experience. Lots of people think that if they don't have period content, they shouldn't perform. And it is not untrue that there are some people in the performance community who are happy to let people believe that and to encourage that because that is what they want to see. We'll dig more into that in a few minutes. By and large, in my experience, and in the East Kingdom, there's a big emphasis on period performance. Nevertheless, there is lots of room. Most bards I know are a little more like vampires. We just want to make more. We want to meet more. We want to encourage more. We want to offer space and patronage. I would rather somebody get up and do something, and we'll talk about the 10-foot rule, which is most Bardic circles, unless you've been told otherwise, have room for almost any performance that falls within a few parameters that I'm going to kind of outline as suggestions. They don't have to be period. they should feel SCA appropriate. Like Garb, they should feel like you're making a reasonable attempt to not shine a blinding light on the fact that we are all 21st century people playing at having an experience from the Middle Ages. So we don't want to hang too heavy a lampshade on it, although sometimes for a goofy filk or a funny song, that can actually be hilarious. We'll talk about timing and appropriateness in a moment. Here is my recommendation. Here is my invitation to you. What should you perform when you start out as a bard? My questions to you are these. What excites you as a performer right now? Do that. What are you good at performing right now? Do that. Again, with the understanding we're going to talk about that choosing things that are appropriate to an SCA setting, which is not the same as period appropriate. What would excite you to learn or get better at right now? What's something that's adjacent to your skill set that you want to learn more? Those are places I encourage you, if you're new to this, start there. Sometimes this has become a favorite analogy of mine, since I know there's some overlap between role players and Scadians. First night, first day of the campaign, you've all written up your characters, and the DM drops you and draws a spot in the middle of the grid map with the outlines of this one room. And there's a bunch of monsters in it. And you got to clear the room because there's loot to be had and opportunities to build up your skills. But here you are in the room and you have no idea where else it goes. So be in the room, be there, engage the room, fight the monsters, kill the monsters, take the treasure. Don't stab your buddies. We're not playing Munchkin. And it feels so good. I hope it will feel good to you. I hope that your first experience performing was rewarding. And if it wasn't as rewarding as you would have liked, I hope you will find others. You should be able to find people who are going to invite you in, who are going to hold the door open for you, because it's a rush. And with luck, you will find an opportunity where you will get to surprise people who don't know you, who haven't had a chance to see what you can do, who haven't seen the skill set that you have developed from outside the SCA that you can bring to bear, or who have not heard the authenticity of your emotions and the ways in which you could translate how you feel into a performance or a piece of writing or both. It's a rush. I hope all of you get the opportunity, have had that opportunity. I hope you will get it again and again. If you do that, that's attacking the room to me. And you're going to start in the room that you know best. At some point, you will probably notice that the pickings may be getting slim. You've looted the room. The monsters are all dead now. You can stay here. You can check the crannies, see if there's some gold that you overlooked, but the payoff is going to diminish a little. You've exhausted this room. I will defend to the death your right to stay in this room for as long as you want. For the rest of your life, for the rest of your time as a bard in the SCA, as you wish. Nobody has the right to tell you you have to do something else. If they are doing that, they are violating the courtesy that is foundational to the SCA, in my opinion. You, however, I suspect, are someone who is attracted to challenges, excitement, and finding the right challenges and the right excitement that is suited to your temperament, to your emotional comfort, to your self-confidence is the trick here. At some point, you're going to want to try a new room. The easiest way to find that new room, of course, is to check one of the doorways that has already been marked and find out what's there. Find something adjacent to what you're already good at, to what you're already enjoying. Check that room out and see where it leads. You may find out that these are level 20 monsters and you're a level 5 fighter at this point, and it's not for you yet. It's really intimidating, and you beat a hasty retreat and you shut the door and you bolt it. And you go, whoa, not that room, not now anyway. I need to at least be a level 12 before I'm comfortable with that. You have a right to do that. You may find there's a room that's got monsters that are going to stretch you, and you may get some slashes and some bruises, so to speak. It's going to push you, hopefully not punish you, but push you out of your comfort zone. And you're going to feel alive and scared and excited. And then you're going to find a pile of dead monsters and some loot that is at a whole other level than the loot you've enjoyed up to this point. And so on. That's one way to do it. That's somewhat the way I feel I did it. That's the way I think some of the people I know have done it. Now, that may mean some of you are coming in with a passion towards period art. And that is where you are comfortable, and that's where you want to be, and that's fine. Some of you, I was one of these, are an unfulfilled secret songwriter who would love to maybe become a rock star in this tiny sliver universe. I know they won't tell you this, but that is okay too. It really, really is. We will talk about the pitfalls of wanting to be a rock star and the general public nature of being a bard in a little bit. But it is okay. And over time, you may find that things that are adjacent to that are doing what you can tell other people like. Some people really want to hear some period stuff from you, and that may stretch you in a good way. I will defend to the death your right to pick the time and place of your choosing before you go there. I will defend to death your right to be stretched outside your comfort zone and then defend your boundaries and take a step back and say thank you, but no thank you. As politely as you can. Fiessier. So, let's talk about when and where to perform. Right? We've talked about some of the places, some of the venues. Obviously, there are Bardic circles. Bardic circles are a great place to perform, even as the risk that attends them is it often is all or mostly cooks and not so much eaters. And with luck, a lot of the cooks enjoy good food. And so you're sampling each other's wares. You're listening to each other. You may be encouraging each other. You might ask if someone wishes feedback, or you might, more importantly for yourself, we'll talk about this, find ways to get feedback so that you can grow. But you're surrounded by people who like what you're doing and love to do it themselves. There are big published Bardic circles at big events. Penzic tends to have them announced and published. There are some in a particular camp on a particular night that are well known. There are informal Bardic circles at smaller events. You know, those are great too, especially if you're newer. There are sometimes local Bardic circles or workshops in between events, depending on what the culture is, where it is in its life cycle. Somebody may post, I'm going to have a Bardic circle, or I'm going to have a workshop, or I'm going to have a little of both. You guys want to come to my house? Depending on how much critical mass you have, people will come and do it. Those are really powerful and helpful. Right now, a lot of those are happening online. And if those are not available local to you, I know Doug hosts one at least monthly for the East Kingdom. My friend Jazzy McIntosh, aka Juliana Labadelle, hosts one periodically. Right now, it's hard to swing a dead cat without hitting one if you know who to ask and where to look. Thank you, Douglas, for posting that. Third Thursday of every month. And then there are informal venues, camps, street corners at a big event. Some of my favorite moments are just, I've met somebody and I was always eager to share. I still am. And my wife, who is socially a little better than I am, sometimes knows the opportunities to offer an invitation, which always sounds better if you can manage it from someone who's not you, and offers it up. And or as you start to get known, people may ask. You'd be surprised and hopefully flattered. And you may find yourself giving a little performance, whether it's a trial of a new piece or just somebody who hasn't heard something or wants to hear something they've heard once before, or do you know this piece? And it may be you and one or two other people, the occasional passerby. That can be electric and magical. These are some of the times and places when it can happen. Let's see. Now, when that happens, and if anybody has any other thoughts of venues that I've overlooked, feel free to throw them out. I don't want to limit to just what I can think of. I'll keep it going. Now, when you're getting started, and even after you get started, what are some things we want to be careful about? This is the heart of, right, the why didn't someone tell me this? Some things that can hinder your growth, that can cause you to accidentally ruffle feathers, that can land awkwardly. And as some of you may know, in the SCA, it can take some time to recover from a mistake, which is unfortunate. And it's not necessarily anybody's intention that that be the case. I have been there. Hostage Bardic, which is you're on a roll, you're sharing, and the audience does not feel there is a polite way for them to exit your venue or ask you to terminate. When in doubt, one piece. Unless you're asked or specifically told to do more than a piece, do one piece, finish, take the applause and bow, and be prepared to sit down if not just sit down. If someone wants more than that, regardless of how formal the venue is, they will ask. Another thing to be mindful of is showing up at a Bardic circle, performing, and then bolting. It comes across as very selfish. I have definitely been guilty of this. I was guilty of it a lot when I was starting out. It was a bit of a misstep. I am sometimes guilty of it now, and at the moment, because of the different circumstances we're under, where we are not really at an event all the time, there are times and places where it is possible to get away with it. If I've been invited to a circle, and at the moment as a royal bard, that does happen. The constraints can be different. If you're being invited in as a guest and they say, listen, you're free, we're asking for this because you have something we want. And if you want to just do that, nevertheless, if it's possible for you to share your piece and respectfully sit through at least a couple of other performers, it shows a level of respect. It shows a level of attentiveness and caring about what other people than you are doing that will reflect very well on you. So it's a really good idea. The other piece, of course, is, especially if you are newer, the world of what other kinds of pieces there are, the ideas for performances, inspirations, is full of other performers. And the opportunity to learn about something you might like by seeing someone who does something you might like is huge. And if you don't stick around at circles, you're going to miss those opportunities sometimes. Very important to me and to most of us who, whenever you can, give the author of a piece credit if you know it. Be clear and explicit when you can about whether or not the piece is original to you. If the piece is original to you, say so. Find a way in your introduction, such as, the inspiration for writing this piece came to me when, brief intro. But that way, people know this is original to you. And some people may ask, especially if they haven't heard it before. I used to assume that almost everybody did their own work. I like to do my own work. Writing is one of my favorite things about being a bard. And it is tremendously gratifying for other people to hear you perform their work. If there's something you really admire, one of the most wonderful ways to honor and flatter and praise and bless a bard is to ask if you might have permission, or if they have that posted somewhere, and would they mind if you performed it. There are a few who might choose to say no, or might say, this is actually kind of new. I'm still getting it around. I want people to see it and hear it from me for a little while and have it be my baby before I'm totally comfortable sharing it. That can happen, and that's perfectly fair. Most bards I know will be deeply, deeply flattered and honored if they're asked. It's certainly one of my favorite things. Yes, if you are filking, especially if you are filking something that is not an obvious modern tune, giving credit to the author of the tune that you are performing is really, really important, particularly because I didn't realize how deep our culture went sometimes, that there are people who filk SCA songs. Quick one-liner. Filk means different things to different people. Outside the SCA context, it is generally considered a catch-all term for the music of fandom. So those can be entirely original pieces. A lot of them are effectively song parodies where they are someone else's tune with your new words or with your cleverly tweaked words. In the SCA, as I've experienced it, and this will vary from place to place, I try not to overgeneralize. I like to refer to original. Some people call it music of the modern Middle Ages, when I am writing original words and music. Songwriting is a whole skill unto itself. It is not the same as putting my words on somebody else's music. They are both wonderful, fun skills. I do both. I was honored recently, Lyle says, for the first time when someone asked me for the words of one of my films, and it felt great. Exactly. So I just want you to be aware, some of us, myself included, if I'm performing a piece that I composed and wrote the words to, I will do my best to be gracious about it if someone refers to that as a filk, because it's not period. I don't always love it when people generalize that way, because a lot of people who talk about filk can speak very dismissively of it. And as someone who has learned to love filk and who has a bit of a reputation for doing it with some skill, I don't like the dismissiveness for filk's sake, but I also don't love the dismissiveness around, as I said, what it takes to compose original work that meets the 10-foot rule and moves an audience. That said, this is not about my comfort. This is just about my trying to share what I understand of Bardic culture, because these things that I'm sharing, they're how I feel. They're not how only I feel. Let's see. So we talked about credit. Appropriateness of piece to the venue. When in doubt, especially as you're new and if you're nervous, watch the performers. See what they're doing. See if there's someone who is in charge or someone who has been at the circle long enough. You can always lean in and say, are there any guidelines about what kinds of performance are okay here? Does it need to be period? The answer is often, probably, usually, no. It's never a bad idea to check. I know very few circles in the SCA that actually demand period material. If you're at an enchanted ground, technically that does not mean everything you do has to be period. What it does mean is you should make a very reasonable attempt at sharing pieces that stick to that stick to the feel, and that you don't get meta about it. You don't talk about whether what you're doing is period or not. An enchanted ground, the point is not to break the illusion. Playing a lute piece on guitar, if you talk about it like it's a lute and don't draw attention to the fact that it is not, can work just fine at an enchanted ground. Just be aware. A lot of people seem to misinterpret what enchanted ground is about. Enchanted ground is about staying completely immersed in the illusion. Period music definitely is one of the more powerful ways you can enhance that. That doesn't make it a requirement. And there are some places where if you do something that is not period, people will not necessarily say anything against you, and you might see them roll their eyes. So tread carefully. Again, most places where you're going to get that kind of eye roll will have given you some degree of an alert that you're in a context where they're not going to love it. And everybody has their own feelings about that. Is it a risque or bawdy piece? Look around. Do you see children? If you see children, put it away. Please. Please. I know some really, really, really talented bards. This happens to be a sin I don't believe I have committed. rare one. I know some really, really talented bards who cut their teeth doing bawdy material and have had great difficulty in suppressing that impulse. That is a place where, especially at this point in time when there are a lot of children in the SCA. And you're going to find parents who say, I don't care. If you got cussing in your piece, they've heard it all before. If it's bawdy material, it'll either go over their heads or they're going to get some education. You can ask, especially if it's borderline, and be prepared to take no for an answer. But if you're not sure, if you see young kids, put it away. If people seem like they're being very genteel, check. If it looks like people are drinking seriously, or if you're hearing at least two fairly ribald things go down, then you probably don't have to ask. If it looks, there's after parties where people are sloshed and they're having a great old time and they want you to get a rise out of them. That's when you want to pull that material out, definitely. And there's mixes. You can shift the mood. If it's not that mood right now, it's a good idea to ask. Now, as we said, the 10-foot rule. If it doesn't sound brazenly modern, meaning, for me, if you're not referencing rock tropes per se, and that doesn't mean you can't. Okay, Heather Dale's one of the best known and best loved artists. If you listen to her recording of Joan, that's electric guitar. Okay, people who sing it, you don't hear that. But there's ways to mix it. But the 10-foot rule is, I shouldn't see email or airplanes. Again, when you're going for funny, there may be ways you hang a lampshade on it, and that dissonance may create the humor. But check your audience. Is that what they're in the mood for? It's hard to know because, oh my God, it's so rewarding. It's so rewarding to break out a Disney or an Aberfilk, and I have done both, and crack people the hell up. And that's okay. But again, when in doubt, check first. And if you're bothering to check, you should have something else in your back pocket in case the answer is no. Do it smoothly, and you'll do fine. Questions. We're moving along nicely. We still have a half an hour left. Thank you all again for your time and attention. Okay. See us keeping quiet, and that's fine with me. I just want to make sure that nobody feels like they're getting railroaded. Now, how are you going to know when you get out there now? You found your first couple of venues. You go out, you do a thing. How do I know if I'm doing it right? There are a few obvious ways, and some, if you're newer to it, maybe it's not obvious. And depending on the culture, maybe you haven't seen these. The first obvious one, obviously, is how does the audience react? Do you get big applause? Don't be surprised, and this is not a bad thing. So novelty, meaning, oh my God, I don't know this person, but wow, that was impressive, has for me, you get a big outsized response that first time because we love it. We love discovering talent we haven't found before. I love it. Sometimes I'm jealous too, and I love it. You may find that you're going to get praise after the performance. If someone comes up and takes the time to tell you they were really, really impressed with what you did or moved by what you did, take a moment. Please drink it in. My invitation to you is to not turn away other people's praise. That can be very challenging for various reasons because of internalized messages we have, because of the focus on modesty and humility in our general culture and very specifically in SCA culture. There is an appropriate way to honor someone who is going to the trouble and taking the time and energy and being a little vulnerable by giving you praise. My invitation is not the only way, but my invitation, a very simple way, is to take a deep breath, breathe in what they said, hear it, let your heart warm with it, let it show in your face, and then say very simply, thank you. You may wish to share more with them. You may gush with excitement. Be mindful. It's okay. Yes. Yes. Thank you. Thank you. An old coach told us to say thank you to anyone offering you praise and never point out what you did wrong. Yes, that's the big thing. Turning aside praise, even when you in your heart of hearts don't feel it, you don't feel like you deserved it, you feel imposter syndrome coming up, that's not their fault. Recognize that what they saw was different than what you felt. And that what they saw was incredible to them and moving. You may have just created a moment that they're going to carry with them for the rest of their SCA life and not realize it. Some of the most amazing memories I've heard from people are performances. Some of the most amazing memories I carry are performances that I witnessed, that were offered to me, and moments that I've shared. Take time to learn who the safe people are, who are experienced bards who may wish at some point to have a conversation with you and may want to get the inside baseball about it. Yes, right. And it may be to keep someone from changing their minds about you, but that's basically true, which is being told by someone you offer praise that they made mistakes that maybe you didn't see is like pouring a glass of cold water on a gorgeous meal that you offer someone. It's about letting people enjoy things. Let people enjoy you. You got up there for them to enjoy you. You know you screwed up. And if you make this mistake and you say it because you just can't help yourself, take a breath later and forgive yourself and get over it. It'll be okay. It'll be okay. These are not criminal offenses, but they are best practices. Let it go in. You worked hard for that applause. You worked hard for that praise. Recognize that you enjoy all sorts of performances where people screw up and you don't see it, and it's perfectly valid that you had a great time. They get to understand and appreciate and learn from their mistake and do better next time, just as you as the performer will get to do that. Revel in the fact that maybe you got praise even if it wasn't the best you thought you could do. Because later, when you continue to polish that piece, you give it over the best that you can do, you'll feel the difference and you will hear that from your audience. There will come a day, years down the road, or even months down the road, where someone will come up to you who's seen you perform before, and they will say, and this is its own double-edged sword, you have leveled up. Wow, I've seen you and I enjoy what you do. That was a whole other level. I'm going to say for myself, there's two amazing things that happen there. There is an acknowledgement that the time and effort I put into getting better paid off, and that they saw exactly what I was trying to do and how I consciously chose to do it better. And especially if you never heard the criticism from them, there is this really tricky backhanded compliment going on. I get that in my experience from time to time in the SCA. Someone gives me something, oh, and I want to see more of that. And what I hear is, yeah, wow, so where's that been all this time? I've had to put up with what you've done up to this point. You know, man, you were keeping the good stuff from us, weren't you? And it's important for me to take a moment, and I invite you to take a moment and recognize the SCA makes all sorts of mistakes. I'm online on Facebook today. The SCA sometimes lets people in that we don't realize are problematic. And then we have a whole issue with finding a way to set up a boundary around them. And it is driven primarily by enthusiastic, kind-hearted, loving, passionate geeks who want you to succeed, who are happy for you when they see you succeeding, and who want to tell you and want to show you how excited they are, how much they see the love and energy that you poured into what you did. The SCA does, by and large, reward hard work to the best of its ability, the individuals in it and the institutions, and it's going to fail you sometimes. You are going to find times when you don't advance the way you want to. When the award you had your eye on, and it's okay to want those. It really, really is. I don't care what anybody else tells you. Drake told you it's okay. And don't quote me. Last one, tokens. This is a simple one. It's a beautiful, beautiful practice that we have in the SCA because it's hard to turn it away and it's hard to redirect it. If someone puts a token in your hand, they're saying, I want more from you. They're saying, I want you to have something to hold on to and look at again later, to recognize how important that was to me, what it meant to me. Like so much else, you may find that the first time you hit a new plateau, and that may be that you're coming in bright and hot and shiny, you may get showered with them at your first big performance. It may happen 6 months later. It may happen a couple of years later. And for various reasons, it may never happen, or it may never be recognizable to you as happening the way you expected or hoped. There may be a trickle. It'll depend on the culture. It'll depend on the individuals and how they're feeling that day. They do come sometimes. Sometimes you will get one and you will be offered the opportunity to hold on to this for up to a year and a day, and then pass it along. I keep 2 pouches. One is for the ones I've just received that I'm still processing and that I want to treasure and may want to look at again. And one's for the tokens that I have acquired, and some people make, that are from my giving out, as well as ones that I've had that I think are ready to continue in their journey and be something I give to someone else. Where I can, I remember and I share the provenance. If you can, it's great. And don't feel like you have to do that extra labor just because Drake talked about it. If someone goes to the trouble of giving you a provenance for a gift, this came to me, this was made for me by Master Hector of the Black Heights, and I offer it to you now. If you have the opportunity, it's worth maybe taking a moment, and they will almost certainly respect your desire to take a moment and write that down. And perhaps write down the names that they want to give you on the provenance, because that's special. Again, you don't have to. These are some signs you're doing well. And we're getting close. Developing. Some of this is going to flow from what I've already said to you. How do you learn new material? How do you find new sources? What cracked you open like a nut? What did you just love when you heard it? If you loved it when you heard it, if you think of it, find the person who performed it. Give them that praise that they've earned. Ask them if you're not sure you didn't hear, whether it's their piece or whether they got it from someone else. Ask if it's theirs. Are they willing to share it with you? As I said, most bards will say yes, except those who have boundaries for whatever reason. But for most part, you're giving them an amazing gift. And the opportunity to perform this piece you love is going to be a gift for you. Again, ask who wrote it. Ask what the period source was, or the SCA inspiration, if it occurs to you. And when you perform it, please remember to give attribution. So write down their name, double check the pronunciation, see if you can give them word fame by sharing their work. That's one way. If you see an experienced performer that you like, nobody really minds talking about themselves, I promise. As you can tell, in my case, I'm pretty open about it. But a lot of people enjoy it. And there's an opportunity there to ask them about their process, ask them about the sources, ask them, are there other bards based on what you saw me do tonight that maybe I should meet? I love introducing people to other bards. That sort of thing. Are you finding, because of your persona, that there is a particular period, a form, a work that you enjoy? Research it. Feel free to ask questions, and Google is your friend. These things will start opening up rooms to you on the dungeon. Adjacent spaces you can shift into where you can take skills you've built, build up newer ones that are comparable and compatible with them. Now, how do you improve? There are classes. One of my favorite things about the SCA is the offering of classes. They have them at events. They have them. They have workshops. You can go there and get polish. Pay attention. Be smart and kind to yourself around your boundaries. If someone is giving you feedback in a way that floods you or that feels uncomfortable, don't be afraid to say, I'm getting full. If someone says, would you like feedback? Don't be afraid to say, not right now, thank you. If you're coming off a performance that left you heady and delighted, and you're really nurturing that because you haven't felt that in a while, you have a right to not pop that balloon because somebody has some ideas about how it can be better. If you really want the feedback and you don't want it right now, take the time to write down their information. And when you get the chance, reach out to them later. And if they forgot, it's okay. And if you're confident enough, welcome it. Again, but protect yourself. You know, as I said, take the time to introduce yourself to performers who impress you. That honest praise will help. You will build a relationship. God knows my relationship with, among others, just to name the name that's come up already, Heather, has been phenomenally powerful. She's inspired a lot from me. I've been delighted to have the opportunity to work with her, to record with her. And she takes patronage very seriously. She delights in giving other performers opportunities because she sees how her talent and her warmth and her personal charm and generosity has drawn people to her. And she pays it forward constantly. And that's the kind of bard I aspire always to be, and the kind of bard I hope always to help foster in the people I meet. Online forums will help you get feedback. You can share a piece you're working on. You can reach out to someone and say, I have a piece in the works. You can send them the Word file, let them read it. I did that a lot. Some newer pieces, pieces that require research, personal research. I have a piece that I recently shared that was intended to be about representation and inclusion and issues that are coming very to the fore this past week. And I spent a lot of time reaching out to Scadians of color, expanding my personal circle because I was sorry to say I just didn't know enough of them personally and have a close enough relationship. And I said, that's no excuse. I can't put out a piece that is going to read to people of color, women, non-binary people, the people that I want to champion, whose experiences I'd like to see expressed because I don't feel like I see them that much. I want to make sure that it doesn't come across as tone deaf. Does this represent accurately your experience? What do you think? Do you have suggestions? Are there things in the language that are problematic for you? And then listen and take the feedback. I want to write about this event. I've only been to that event once or twice. You know the history. You know the history of the barony. What are some things I should learn? You know, network. These things will ultimately improve your performance and your toolkit. Recognize other bards. Once you've been to a few events, if you've been around for a year or more in the community, it is probably a good idea to find or make some tokens that you can pass on. Take a look at some of the tokens you've received and think about which ones you're deeply attached to. If you have 3 and they're amazing, keep them. Look online or craft if you do rings. And now let's talk about advancement, and then I'll have time for maybe just a shred of back and forth. Most kingdoms have 3 levels of ANS award, right? Your AOA level, and again, if you're new, this may be news to you. Most of you are probably familiar with it. This is something I wanted to know when I started. You have your AOA, Award of Arms level. The East Kingdom only a few years ago realigned theirs to meet this basic standard that most other kingdoms do. And it's helpful because it means if you're out of kingdom, sometimes there's an opportunity or an activity that occasionally there are some exclusive ones that say, to participate in this, you have to have a grant level award. And now that the East Kingdom's Orders of High Merit are grant level awards, the second level, our artisans can do that. When they did not confer a grant, even though they were at least as hard to get, that deprived people of that opportunity. AOA level, grant level, patent level is the peerage. Those are the three baseline levels. To get in the ANS path to the grant level or the Laurel, you almost always are going to have to be demonstrating some period work and some research in addition to your peer-like qualities. Some places they will expect that even at the AOA level. And if you're doing good work and you're making people happy, hopefully that will come. If something isn't coming, you may want to find a mentor, which we'll get to in a moment. There are, in some kingdoms, it will vary wildly, special awards for performance or composition. In the East, we have the Order of the Troubadour for performers. We have the Order of the Golden Lyre, which I don't have, for composition. I'm Queen's Bard. I wanted it more than I wanted a lyre, so it's all good. It'll happen if it ever happens, because it's meant to. But these are some various things. Every kingdom, every barony has different pieces like this. You'll learn about them as you go. Ask, check out the website. Don't get starved or obsessed with the awards. They're wonderful when they come. There's nothing wrong with setting milestones and objectives for yourself. That is how I grow. That is how a lot of the people I know grow. It's tricky when you get emotionally attached. We'll get to that a little more in a moment. Participating in competitions and championships and events can bring prestige and can elevate your game. Prepping for them will elevate your game. Prepping for the kingdom level Bardic 5 times brought up my game to a whole other level. And in the East Kingdom, we have a very, very deep pool of talent. And while it frustrated me over time to recognize that I wasn't as much the hot stuff as I wanted to believe, coming to terms with it and recognizing that I needed to up my game. The East Kingdom has drawn in people who have professional level skill sets the last few years. And it meant I was going to have to keep working at it until I could outcompete them. I was very, very pleased that I managed it this year, and it still was not under my control. So these are some of those opportunities. They will up your game. They will bring prestige. They may bring heartbreak. Have support. Get it. Take your own temperature. Figure out whether hitting a wall is going to really hurt, and whether it's going to teach you something that's worth taking that risk. I think it's good for a lot of people, and the people who say that our culture is way too competitive have a valid point as well. Only you can figure out what's going to be the best choice for you, but ask around. Now, finding a mentor. Quick ping. If you have a peer, doesn't have to be for Bardic or ANS. Do you have a peer relationship? And are you a peer? Because some of you may be. Anybody? I don't want to take too long because I know we're getting close on time. Good. Okay. These things can come with time. Some recommendations, and again, this is all going to be in the class notes. One form it often takes, if you want to have a peer who is a Laurel, which is a good way to go because they have met the test. They may or may not specialize in your particular kind of performance. That's okay. Check the rapport that you have with them. See if there is clear, strong mutual respect. They should have experience. They should have strong performing skills. They should have a good reputation. Ask around. Listen if people give you dissenting opinions. If you're going to tie yourself to this person, it's important to know what you're getting into. It is a good idea to find someone who is in kingdom, because they will be able to promote and protect and advocate for you in the kingdom lists, which are specific. It is not always a requirement. I spent 5 years learning from Mr. Zoth at the Mid-Realm. Ultimately, I made a change a year ago, and we found peers who were in or local to the East. Toki is former East Kingdom, but still very active, and Peregrine is East Kingdom. That wasn't where he got his laurel, but he's here now, and I wanted to work more locally in the end. They should be able to be someone you can accept honest feedback from. Ha! Oh, I hear that. Wow, you were scribed last night. Congratulations. They should be someone who can give you honest feedback, who can help you network, and who will protect you and support your goals. Not necessarily someone who is going to try and bend your goals to fit what they imagine. They should be someone who can listen to you. You can take a look at areas where you don't know that there's a particular skill that is not your long-term strength. Maybe you want a mentor who will balance that and who will help you develop that skill more deeply. Some other opportunities to advance. Do you want to perform concerts? Take time. If there's an event that has concerts, find out who organizes those. Get to know them. Develop a friendship. Strategic friendships are okay. Anybody who tells you different is selling you a line. Okay, you look around. People are genuine friends with people who also, as it turns out, are in positions to help them advance. It happens all the time in real life. It happens all the time in the SCA. There's no shame in it. Everyone understands that's how it works. That's called patronage. And patronage is not a dirty word, especially not in our area. Feel free to reach out to Bardic champions that you've encountered. Is there someone in your barony or region that you can at least ask a question or who can point you in a direction? Feel free to discuss that. Do you like recording music? Do you like the idea of recording music? There are performers who've done it, myself included, who can probably tell you a little about it. You can decide if that's something you want to do. There are reasons I like doing it because it puts my music out in a form to be where I'm not always there. And now we get to, with just a few minutes left, fame and reputation. I want to take a moment to talk about this. We're performers. As Heather said the day I met her, we have egos. We really do. We want to get known. It's flattering. It's exciting. Showing up at your first event where you start getting addressed by people you didn't know you, or maybe people you don't happen to off the top of your head recognize or know on a first name basis, but they know yours. That's kind of cool. And it's definitely a sign, by the way, that you are going places. How you get known is going to determine your rep. Your rep's going to last longer than your newfound fame. And a problematic rep, especially in the SCA, takes a very long time to fix. I am speaking from experience as a loud ADHD neurodivergent adult who is a bull in the china shop and allows my enthusiasm to get ahead of me all the time. It took a while before not only my performance skills, but my tact and my judgment were such that someone sitting on a throne was going to be completely comfortable, putting me in a position where I might be a mouthpiece for the kingdom and where things I said and did would reflect on the reputation of my kingdom as a whole. And that was very frustrating to figure out and upsetting at times. And at the moment, now that I'm there, I'm really glad I had the time to learn those lessons and that people were willing to teach me the hard way. Humility, which is a crucial SCA value, is not about thinking you're no good. It is about knowing that there is more to learn and that everyone you meet has something unique and special that deserves your time and respect and attention. You do not have to consider yourself an imposter, though we often will. You do not have to run yourself down. You do not have to sell your own abilities and achievements short to have humility. You have to recognize, my invitation is to recognize that the ultimate goal is to be a small p, peer among peers. One of many talented, brilliant, loving, passionate people who make our society a better place by sharing their gifts. Getting to be treated as equal with them, which is not as hard as it sounds, is an amazing opportunity and a privilege. You will sometimes progress fast and sometimes very slowly. The social mistakes are going to be more problematic than any faceplant you do on a stage. Nobody really remembers. Well, people may remember, but nobody that I can tell has ever docked me lasting points for going up on lyrics. In the last few years, I do it more than I want to admit. But when I ruffle feathers, when I rub someone the wrong way, when I say something that makes someone feel disrespected in the heat of the moment during these high emotional temperature times, that is going to stick to the bottom of my shoe for a very long time, and it has, believe me. Having a mentor and maybe a couple of close friends, plus your partner or your spouse that you can vent to when you're frustrated or upset, is really important. It helps because if you have a safe space to take those feelings to, you are at much less risk of venting them where it is not safe. And by the way, no matter how you've locked it down, any post you make on social media is public. Any social media post you make is public. And venting your feelings there may and probably will catch up with you. It may not be right, but if you think about all the times you've been just scrolling through your feed and somebody said something, it wasn't about you. It had nothing to do with you. And it made you feel vague booked, made you feel criticized, or just bummed you out and just really took the wind out of your day. It's a public space. Even if you didn't mark it public, your circle of friends is so much bigger than you realize, and the impact of your words on the page sometimes is bigger than the impact you get when you perform live. Let this be fun. Focus on your growth, on your enjoyment, and what you create. Put that ahead of the outcomes and awards. When you go into a space, when you go into a competition, take a moment, if you have to center yourself and decide what really matters to you. I came here today with a new piece that I think tells a story that I think is important. I want to tell that story today. I want to get to the end of this competition. I want to share that story. And much as I want to be chosen as Kingdom Bard, telling this story matters to me more. And if this story bothers somebody and I don't get chosen because this story is too troublesome, I will accept that risk because this is what I came here to do. I got lucky that day. And I'm really glad that I made that choice and that I had mentors who could make sure that I had made that decision consciously. I have a few more minutes, though we know we've hit time. If there's anything people want to talk about or ask, we can have at most 15 minutes of maybe a little Q&A, but I've reached the end of my notes. Let me take a moment now and share out with you the link to the page where you can get those notes if you want them, and where you can see other stuff, other things I've shared, course materials, and hold on a second. There we go, class notes. So this is the general class notes page I'm putting into the chat, which includes New Bard's roadmap. As I said, the downloadable PDF version of these class notes are there. And as I said, thank you so much for your time and attention. This was a good bunch of people. I appreciated some of the feedback. Is there anything you want to talk about before we close the room? It's so quiet. Thank you. I'm so glad. Okay. If anybody wants to stick around for an extra few minutes, feel free as you. Great one, Craig. I noticed that most events don't have circles. Is there a reason for this? I think that will vary from culture to culture. Um, you're quite welcome. I was that guy in the East when I started, and I suspect the best way to help make sure that there are performance spaces at events is to reach out to organizers in advance. It can be hard. I know that there are royals, Wilhelm and Vienna, as well as Margarita, who were very pro performance and tried very hard to create performance venues. And they were able to, but of course, you can't always count on the royals to make that happen. Um, but a good thing to do there would be to speak to the people who traditionally are running events and find out whether that's part of their vision. Yeah, yes. Thank you, Alan. There may or may not be a circle because you did not start one. There are sometimes post rebels. I've found in my experience they're not as frequent as they used to be, as perhaps the general composition of society has aged a bit, and they still happen sometimes. Um, I don't know. It's hard. I remember being really young and hungry and wishing there were more venues. I remember Annalita, a number of years ahead of me on that curve, telling me she wasn't, she didn't feel that drive anymore. She had been Kingdom Bard. She had recorded her music. And now she mostly liked to perform when she was asked to, and going, who are you kidding? Now I'm at a place where I get it a little more. And that may not be your experience over time. There's no question, as a newer performer, more venues is really important. Recognize right now, in this moment where we are in this online lockdown space, there's a very scary option that is not for everybody, that nonetheless is an opportunity here, which is to take a few minutes, use your phone or your camera, whatever the best option you have. Setting up a YouTube channel is really easy. You can just post it on Facebook as a video, but share your performance. I'm not going to recommend to you that you try to set yourself a goal of doing it every day. There are online venues now. I suspect that a lot of these online venues will continue even after eventually we unlock. Some of them predate COVID hitting. Doug's was around on a regular basis. It's important because, of course, a lot of people don't have a critical mass of people close to them. I've tried to run a local Bardic circle for the southern region of the East Kingdom for on and off for a few years. And if I put out an invitation, sometimes we got a dozen people, and sometimes we got two. Sometimes we got no one. And there's that feeling of, am I going to put that much time in and get chips and soda and then have nobody show up? It doesn't always fix itself. And there are ways. I certainly would say, Craig, for us in the East Kingdom, we currently have Doug and Solveig who have stepped in and brought a lot of energy to that, to bringing more opportunities and to making more venues happen. I would recommend those of us who had that particular institutional structure around. We have the East Kingdom College of Performers, and that's a place to raise that question. If you're not getting an answer to the question, I don't want to say there's a point where you may want to just take a breath or pack it in for a few months and regroup, but sometimes that's what has to happen. I will say, though, as I said, if you have a story to tell, if you have a song to share, especially right now, even if you don't choose to share it out publicly, taking a little video of yourself so that you can take a moment and examine it, which can be painful. It's a great way to learn. And sharing it with people that you trust and care about. See what they think. And they may say, put it out there. There is risk in doing so, and it may be rewarding. I know some amazing performers now who have set intimidating daily goals for themselves and put out videos daily that blow my mind at how much better they are than me at things that I pride myself in. And it's okay. There's room for everybody. Nobody else does exactly what you do. And if I didn't say that earlier, that's one that I invite you to take away from this. Nobody else does exactly what you do, exactly the way you do it. Your only real competitor is the bard you were yesterday and last week and last year. That is the measuring stick. And I defend to your death the right to stay where you are happy and where you are comfortable for as long as you wish, even if it's the rest of your life. I want to hear you perform. I want to see you put yourself out there as much as you're comfortable. I'll mention two. In the East Kingdom, I've noticed the Royal Bard is a piece where the East Kingdom expectations around ANS have shaped the expectations, where it's only required to do one period piece. And I've definitely seen people express the opinion, and it's shown up in the way that performance has happened, that if I don't lead with a period piece, and if I don't have a period piece prepared for the second round, I may endanger my ability to get to the finals. That frustrates me at times because I don't feel like that's what the framework said it was about. I like creating original stuff. And I get, I think, some of why that may be happening. Because ANS and BART and performance are such a tricky fit. Certainly in the East, I don't know. We've only had performers compete in the Kingdom ANS competition a few times in the last few years. I was one of them. I don't know when the last time was we had someone be a finalist or win. I'm sure someone has, but I don't know if a performer has won the ANS championship in the last decade. Which means if you are a period performer who learns and focuses heavily on period performance and music, and you want to serve at the Kingdom level, there's a perhaps justifiable feeling that the only space for that for them is Royal Bard. There are only, I mean, we're blessed. We have two. We have two every year. And if there's a perhaps sense of territoriality around that, I have definitely gotten a hit from time to time that there are some people in the period music community that feel that what they do is niche because people don't accept it and people aren't interested in spending time learning it, and it's an acquired taste. It is an acquired taste in my experience, and it can be beautiful and amazing. And yet, when I want to write a piece that I want to reach a broad audience and I want to move their emotions, if I make the choice to do that in a period form and I focus heavily on the periodicity of it, I have one piece that I composed that was in a period form. And when I perform it, I get lots of feedback about the fact that it is very period and authentic sounding to a lot of people. There are some things that I am probably going to adjust about it over time. What I almost never hear from anyone is the content, the lyrics, what I wrote about, which was about the gifts we give each other when we collaborate, which to me was every bit as important as the stretching myself and doing period forms. But I recognize that when I do it as an ANS piece, that's what almost everybody sees and hears, and that's almost all they evaluate it on. So when they wonder why I want to do something in original musical style that is not period, and some of them will accuse me of that it sounds kind of Broadway, because that is an influence I bring into my skill set. The reason is I want there to be space for people not to have the distance that I think comes from focusing on. Yes, I am on Facebook. I am listed as Eric Schrager. I'm listed as Drake Oranwood. When in doubt, if you go to drakethebard.com, the ways to get a hold of me there should be available. Feel free by all means to head to your Baronio meeting. And it was great seeing you. I'm so glad that everybody took the time and that y'all stayed a little late for my extra ramblings. I hope it resonates with you. I certainly hope that I have not said anything that that is off-putting to people who have passion for period music. I'd like to think that people who have gotten a chance to hear some of my Elizabethan lute pieces will understand that I speak of passion for period music from a place of a participant. I love to do the both and. I have a song that is dedicated to this particular dilemma. You're very welcome. Tell you what, because it is pertinent to this conversation, in case anybody might dig it, I will send you a link to that one particular song. As you might find it fun. And I think it captures some of what I have to say on this subject. I won't hold everybody up right now by performing it. And of course, I sent the wrong thing. Let me try one more time. Or did I just not go? No, I did not. There it is. Plant your feet. That is a good question. Does anybody know whether Ethelmark's doing online Bardic circles? I suspect they are. A lot of kingdoms are. Feel free, if you're in SCA Bardic Arts and you hear about one, feel free to post about it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Craig. But yeah, Plant Your Feet is about that. Yeah, I hear that. Being an essential worker can be a tricky thing. Thank you, everyone, so much for your time. As I said, I will post this later, so anything that you missed at the time, you can get. And I will cross-post to the group the links that we just shared. Take care, everybody. I am stopping the recording now.